Gwen walked down the long, sterile hallway of the 24th floor, the weight of the tray in her hands feeling like a burden she was no longer willing to carry with a smile. Her legs were trembling with fatigue, and her mind was a whirlwind of dark thoughts directed at her new boss. Right behind her, Jimin followed with a light, effortless stride. He watched the back of her head, noticing the way her shoulders were squared in a posture of pure, unadulterated defiance. He was still reeling from her rant in the elevator. It had been a long time since anyone had the courage to call Jungkook irritating to his face, even if she didn't realize it was to his brother's face. "You ready?" Jimin whispered playfully as they reached the massive mahogany doors. YN didn't look back. She just nodded, her eyes fixed on the target. She knocked once, sharp and loud, and entered without waiting for the "come in" that she knew would be cold anyway. Jungkook was leaning back in his chair, his eyes fixed on a set of documents. He didn't look up as they entered, but the corner of his mouth twitched ever so slightly. He knew exactly who was entering. YN walked straight to his desk and placed the cup down with a firm clack. This time the coffee was steaming hot, exactly as requested. She had added the precise amount of sugar she thought a man of his temperament would need. "Your coffee, sir?" she said, her voice like ice, hot, sweetened, perfect. Jimin leaned against the wall near the door, crossing his arms and watching the scene unfold like a high-stakes drama. Jungkook slowly put down his pen. He didn't look at Jimin. His entire focus was on the girl standing in front of him, breathing heavily from her third trip to the 12th floor. He reached out, his long fingers wrapping around the ceramic cup. He took a sip. YN waited. She was ready to argue if he said it was cold. She was ready to scream if he said it was too sweet. Jungkook set the cup down. He looked at the milk-swirled liquid and then up at YN, with an expression of pure, calculated indifference. "I drink black coffee," he said, his voice flat. "This has milk in it. I don't touch milk." The silence that followed was deafening. YN felt the blood rush to her face, not from embarrassment, but from a rage so hot it felt like it could melt the glass walls of the office. He had let her go down 3 times. He had let her bring him milk coffee twice without mentioning his preference. He had watched her struggle, knowing all along that he was going to reject it anyway. It wasn't about the coffee. It was about the power. She slowly turned her head toward Jimin. Jimin was doing everything in his power to keep from bursting into laughter. He was biting his lip, his eyes crinkling, his shoulders shaking. He knew Jungkook was being a petty brat, but the sheer absurdity of the situation was too much for him. Wan looked back at Jungkook. She didn't say a word. She didn't apologize. She didn't offer to go back down. She simply turned on her heel and marched out of the room, her footsteps echoing her silent fury. As soon as the door slammed shut, Jimin finally let out a loud, boisterous laugh. He walked over to the desk and tossed a document in front of Jungkook. "I had to show you this document," Jimin said, still chuckling. "But I see you've already started your little game. You've really started pestering your new manager, haven't you?" Jungkook didn't laugh. He stared at the closed door, his expression unreadable. "How do you know that?" Jimin leaned over the desk, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "I met your manager at the elevator. She didn't know who I was, but she had a lot to say. She told me you were irritating and that your mind isn't in the right place." Jungkook's eyes narrowed. The hidden eye had told him she was frustrated, but hearing her words through Jimin made it personal. Jungkook looked at Jimin, his annoyance shifting from the girl to his brother. He didn't like that Jimin had shared a moment with her, even an angry one. He didn't like the smirk on Jimin's face. "Is your work done?" Jungkook snapped, his voice cold. Jimin raised his hands in mock surrender, still grinning. Yes, I'm going." "Then get out," Jungkook commanded. As Jimin left, Jungkook looked back at the milk coffee sitting on his desk. He thought about the fire in YN's eyes and the way she had looked at Jimin. The game was no longer just about coffee. It was becoming something much more interesting and much more dangerous. The air in the 24th floor hallway felt heavier than ever as YN walked back toward the CEO's office. In her hands, she carried a simple black coffee. No milk, no cream, just the dark, bitter essence of the beans. Her legs were burning, and her spirit was bruised, but her jaw was set in a line of pure iron. She entered the cabin without a word and placed the cup on Jungkook's desk. Jungkook looked at the dark liquid and then at YN. He didn't mention that he already knew she had been complaining to Jimin. He kept that secret to himself, tucked away for later use. "Next time, make sure it's right the first time," Jungkook said, his voice flat as he took a sip. "And don't let me hear a single complaint. Do you understand?" YN didn't blink. "Yes, sir. Is that all?" Exactly 2 minutes after she sat back down at her desk, the intercom buzzed again. It was like a siren of doom. "In here. Now," Jungkook commanded. When she entered, his desk was covered in thick, intimidating blue folders. He pointed to a massive stack of documents that looked like they belonged in a library archive, not on a single person's desk. "I need every single one of these files reviewed, organized, and summarized," Jungkook stated, leaning back with an indifferent expression. "And I want the final report on my desk today." YN looked at the pile. It was a week's worth of work for an entire team. "Today, sir? It's already mid-morning. Did I stutter?" Jungkook's eyes narrowed. If you can't handle the workload, perhaps the director's pick wasn't so bright after all. YN felt a surge of adrenaline. She grabbed the heavy files, her arms straining under the weight. "Okay, sir," she said, her voice dripping with cold professionalism. "It will be done." Hours bled into one another. YN didn't look up from her screen. She didn't take a sip of water. She was a machine, sorting through data, correcting errors, and weaving a complex web of information into a readable report. At 1 p.m., her stomach let out a faint growl. The rest of the office was emptying out for the lunch break. She stood up, her back cracking, and walked to Jungkook's door. "Sir, it's lunchtime," she said softly. "May I go for a quick break?" Jungkook didn't even look up from his laptop. "No, finish that file first. I need it as soon as possible." YN felt a flash of genuine anger. This wasn't work anymore. It was torture. But she didn't argue. She turned around and went back to her desk, the hunger gnawing at her insides. A few minutes later, the doors to Jungkook's office swung open. All the members, RM, Jin, Sugar, J-Hope, Jimin, and V, walked in, carrying bags of delicious aromatic food. As Jimin closed the door, he caught a glimpse of YN's tired face through the glass and smirked. He leaned over Jungkook's desk, not caring that his brother looked annoyed. "So, how is our irritating and brainless boss doing today?" Jimin teased loudly. Jungkook groaned. "Jimin, shut up." But Jimin was just getting started. He turned to the other members, laughing. "Guys, you won't believe it. That girl met me at the elevator and warned me about a wild animal inside this cabin whose brain isn't in the right place." The cabin erupted in laughter as the brothers joined in to poke fun at Jungkook. Jin, "Wow. Finally, someone told you the truth to your face. You really are becoming a grumpy old boss." V, "Jungkook, are you seriously sending her for coffee over and over? That's such a petty move. You really are irritating, brother." Namjoon, "I hired her to be a manager, not to be your personal marathon runner. Look at her, she hasn't even eaten." J-Hope, "You're acting like a true villain, JK. Even your manager thinks you're out of your mind." Jungkook's face turned a deep shade of red as his brothers continued to laugh at his expense. Jimin added one last sting. "Jungkook, if she resigns tomorrow, we're throwing a party with a banner that says, 'Freedom from the brainless boss.'" Jungkook slammed his laptop shut. "Are you all done? Eat your food and get out." While the members laughed and ate, Jungkook's eyes kept drifting to his laptop screen, which showed the CCTV live feed of YN's desk. He watched her typing away, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion and hunger. The teasing from his brothers was annoying, but it also made him more curious about the girl outside. He wanted to break her spirit, but every time she persisted, she only became more interesting to him. While the city of Seoul began to quiet down, and the office lights on the lower floors flickered off at 6 p.m., the 24th floor remained a hive of silent, grueling activity. YN sat at her desk, her eyes bloodshot and her fingers stiff from hours of typing. She had missed lunch, her back was aching, and her head throbbed with a persistent migraine. Jungkook had left his cabin at 7 p.m. for a dinner meeting, but not before glancing at her with an indifferent expression and reminding her that the file needed to be on his desk before she left. It was 9 p.m. when YN finally hit save and printed the final document. She walked into the empty, dark cabin of the CEO, placed the file exactly in the center of his desk, and let out a shaky breath. She was beyond tired. She was hollow. Just as she was leaving, a text from Jungkook popped up on her phone. "I expect you here at 9 a.m. sharp tomorrow. No late arrivals. Manager, this font is too small. Manager, the temperature in here is 21 degrees. I asked for 22. Manager, find me the physical copy of a contract from 3 years ago. Now," he watched her through his secret CCTV feed, observing the way her jaw tightened every time he called her over the intercom. He saw her rubbing her temples and sighing when she thought no one was looking. To him, it was a game, a test to see how much pressure this brainless girl could take before she snapped. By late afternoon, YN's patience had completely evaporated. Around 5 p.m., Jungkook was in his office with Taehyung, V, and Jin, discussing an upcoming merger. The mood in the cabin was relaxed, with Jin cracking jokes to lighten the atmosphere. Jungkook's laptop sat open on the edge of the desk. Suddenly, a clear, sharp voice began to broadcast through the high-quality speakers. It was YN. She was in her own cabin, having finally picked up a personal call from her best friend. She had no idea the hidden eye also had a hidden ear. "I can't take it anymore, Hana." YN's voice echoed through Jungkook's office, filled with pure frustration. Taehyung stopped mid-sentence. He leaned over and looked at the laptop screen, seeing the live feed of YN pacing back and forth in her office. He looked at Jungkook, who had turned into a statue of ice. "My boss, Jungkook? He is completely brainless," YN shouted into her phone. "The man has 0 brains. All day long it's just, get me coffee, get me this, get me that. He makes me work overtime for no reason other than to watch me suffer. He's an arrogant, heartless robot who thinks he's a god." The silence in Jungkook's cabin was absolute for 3 long seconds. Then Jin let out a snort, followed by a loud, boisterous laugh that could be heard down the hall. Taehyung joined in, doubling over and pointing at the screen where YN was still ranting about Jungkook's lack of intelligence. "Oh my god, Jungkook," Taehyung gasped for air, his eyes watering from laughter. "Your manager is absolutely destroying you right now. Brainless? She really called you brainless." Jin wiped a tear from his eye. "She's right about the overtime, though. Look at her go. She's saying everything we've been thinking for years." Jungkook didn't laugh. He stared at the screen, watching YN hang up the phone and drop her head onto her desk in exhaustion. His face was a mask of dark, swirling emotions. He was the most feared man in the city, the head of a global empire, and he had just been called brainless by a 21-year-old girl, while his brothers watched and cheered. "Is it funny?" Jungkook asked, his voice a low, terrifying whisper. "It's legendary, JK." Taehyung laughed, unaware of the storm brewing in his brother's eyes. Jungkook slowly reached out and turned the laptop screen away. He had seen enough. He had heard enough. YN had just crossed a line that no one else dared to touch. The game was no longer petty. It was personal. The morning after the brainless boss incident, the atmosphere on the 24th floor felt like a battlefield after a heavy storm. YN had arrived at exactly 9 a.m., her eyes heavy and her body aching from the 9 p.m. finish the night before. She moved like a ghost, her usual spark replaced by a dull, professional mask. Jungkook was even more relentless than usual. Every task he gave her seemed designed to make her walk back and forth across the floor or sit for hours staring at tiny spreadsheets. By the late afternoon, YN felt as if she were running on nothing but caffeine and sheer spite. At 6 p.m., the official workday was technically over for most of the building, but YN knew she wasn't going anywhere yet. Feeling a desperate need for a moment of peace, she decided to head down to the canteen for a quick bottle of water. As the elevator doors opened, she saw a familiar face leaning against the back wall. It was Jimin. He was dressed in a sleek suit, looking perfectly refreshed, which stood in stark contrast to YN's messy hair and tired eyes. "Hi, YN." Jimin greeted her with a bright, dimpled smile. "Wait, what happened to you? You look absolutely exhausted." Wen let out a long, dramatic groan and slumped against the side of the elevator. She was too tired to maintain her professional filter, especially around the one person who actually seemed to listen to her. "My boss, Jungkook. He's not a human, Jimin. He's a machine," YN exclaimed, her voice thick with frustration. "He gives me so much work that I don't even have time to breathe, let alone eat lunch. I feel like I'm aging 10 years every single day I spend in that office." She looked at Jimin, her eyes pleading for some kind of cosmic justice. "Tell me, Jimin, what kind of person is Jungkook, sir? Does he ever stop? Is he like this with everyone, or does he just have a personal vendetta against me?" Jimin bit his lip, his eyes dancing with amusement. He knew exactly why Jungkook was doing this. It was a mixture of petty revenge for being called brainless, and a strange, twisted fascination with how much YN could endure. He decided to play along, putting on a mock-serious face to support her. "You're right, YN. This is completely wrong," Jimin said, shaking his head in feigned disappointment. "I can't believe Jungkook, sir, would give you that much work. It's absolutely unfair to treat a manager like this." He leaned in closer, whispering, as if they were co-conspirators. "He really is a tough one, isn't he? But don't worry, you're doing a great job surviving him." The support from Jimin gave YN a tiny boost of morale, but it was short-lived. As soon as she got back to the 24th floor, the intercom buzzed again. "Manager, I need the quarterly reports on my desk before you leave," Jungkook's cold voice rang out. Despite the 6 p.m. encounter with Jimin, YN found herself trapped at her desk once again. It was 8 p.m. by the time she finally gathered her things to head home, her body feeling heavier than it ever had before. As she walked out of the building into the cold night air, she realized that this overtime was becoming her new reality, and that her brainless boss was nowhere near finished with her.